What's up, everyone? I'm Ryan Becker. Welcome to That's Absurd. We're going to dive into everything that's absurd, and we're going to hopefully figure out a way to navigate some of these problems. Before we continue, if you want to hit that subscribe button, if you want to give this video a thumbs up. Today's absurdity: purity. For those of you who don't know what purity culture is or would just like a quick refresher, the basic idea is that purity culture is the idea that you will keep your body sexually protected and pure and innocent before marriage. In other words, you won't have sex or engage in sexual activity before marriage. Now, on a basic level, there's nothing wrong with abstinence, objectively speaking. This conversation and this video is about how that message has been used to control an entire group of people, that is, women. There is nothing that annoys me more right now in Christian culture than purity culture in general. This idea that you have to remain pure before you get married and before you have that special person that God has chosen for you. And this thing annoys me so much because it's been so damaging to the lives of people that really don't deserve to have their lives damaged. Even if you do it right, even if you follow purity culture all the way through, at some point there's a lot of people who, when they've gotten married, they've done everything right, they feel this immense shame and guilt because they feel like they've lost something that they've spent their entire lives trying to protect. So we're going to talk about this from two perspectives. Number one, the women's perspective. Women, if you are watching this, just know this. You are valued and you are loved because of who you are and who created you, and there's nothing that you could do, there's no way that you could dress that would lower that worth or value. Now, I know that there are many of you that have heard something like the crushed rose or sloppy seconds or anything like that. This idea that you're this flower that the second someone crushes it or throws it on the ground and stomps on it, suddenly you have no worth anymore. You're not as valuable anymore. If you've heard that, let me be the first to say, I'm sorry. You should have never had to have heard that. You should have never experienced that. And it's just not true. That is not how value and worth works in the kingdom of God. So let me correct that real quick. Value and worth in the kingdom of God looks like this. You are valuable because the God that with his voice spoke the entire universe into existence declared with that same voice that you are valuable and that you are loved because he loves you. This is a voice that has power that declares that over you. And it's the same for me, that's the same for anyone else that exists or ever has existed. The second part of this is that, well, look, purity is simply not something that you can lose and never get back. This is not like a one and done thing. That's actually probably my biggest point of contention with all of purity culture, is it's just not true. It's just not accurate at all. That is not how purity works. See, I think what we've done is we've conflated purity with innocence and naivety. And the problem with this is that now we're causing guilt and shame where there doesn't need to be any. We're telling people that they can't find redemption, that they can't be better than they've been in the past because of mistakes that they've made or because of things that have been done to them. So let's define these. Let's make the difference known. Innocence is simply your lack of exposure to something. Innocence and naivety is simply your lack of exposure to something. And the problem with innocence is that it's not your choice all the time when that gets taken from you. There are other people that can take away your innocence. You may not have a say because you don't understand what's going on, or you were taken advantage of, and this goes for men and women. And once you've lost innocence, once you've lost the knowledge of something, the lack of exposure, once you've been exposed, there's no going back. When we conflate that with purity, now we tell people that your worth is reflected in something that you had absolutely no control over and no say in, and someone else was able to completely devalue your worth as a human being because of their hateful and evil actions. That's giving way too much power to people who don't deserve it. Purity, on the other hand, is a true and intimate understanding that your worth comes from God and your worth does not come from your behavior. And so if you believe that your behavior is what determines your worth, then when you start to act in a way that you don't agree with, or if someone makes you engage in behavior that you did not approve of, that you've said no to and you did not consent to, now you will start to act out of a place of lower self-worth because of the actions of someone else. But when you understand that your value comes from God, or that your value is innate because you're a created being or because you're a human being, regardless of your beliefs in God, well, then you can keep trucking forward. Purity can be regained again and again because all you have to do is say, I'm choosing right now to be pure. I'm choosing right now to live differently than I've lived before. And regardless of what I've been exposed to, whether it was my choice or someone else made that choice for me, I get to determine what the future of my life will be. Does that erase all of your mistakes? No. Does it erase what happened? No. But what it says is, I'm not going to live my life letting the past determine my future. I am going to let who I am and the decisions I make right now be the thing that propels me into my future. I'm going to let that determine who I am. I'm going to let that define who I am. But I am not going to let things that I no longer have any control over, or maybe never had control over in the first place, define me and define who I am. Look, purity culture and modesty culture at the end of the day seem to have been written solely for men, right? Here's the message. The message is, men, you can't control yourselves. You can't control your eyes. You're just boys will be boys, right? That's locker room talk. We say that you can't control those instincts, and then we tell women, but you can control how you look. You can control the way that you act. You can control the way that you do X, Y, or Z. So it's your fault, because if you didn't do any of that, then I wouldn't have sinned. I wouldn't have fallen short. I wouldn't have succumbed to my savage nature. Ultimately, it seems like it was written to protect men who could not control themselves and their own eyes. Now look, I get that sometimes you can't control the first look. I get that. You look around somewhere, you're at the food court, you're at the beach, whatever, and you just look up and there's something there and you quickly look away. That second look is the thing that you can control, and that's what's going to define whether or not you give in to those impulses. And I think it's absolutely despicable that we would give men such a free pass in controlling their own bodies, but we would tell women, you have to control yours. Look, men, it's on us. And if you want to argue biblical standards for how women should behave or how women should respect men, if you go and read Ephesians chapter 5 and you read the section where it talks about how men and women should relate to one another, especially within marriage, you'll notice that about 85% of that passage is talking to the men, not the woman. It's saying men need to love their wives like Christ loves his bride, the church, with a self-sacrificial love. Now, I'm trying to figure out where the self-sacrifice is in me telling you that you as a woman have to control your own body, but I don't have to control mine. The bottom line is purity culture degrades everybody. It degrades women because it tells them that their worth and value is placed in their behaviors, whether or not they have control over those behaviors because someone else forced them to. And it insults men because it tells them that they'll never be more than their basic urges and instincts, that they'll never be able to control that. And it teaches them that if they don't have those urges, then there's something wrong with them. And that's not the case at all. Look, the entire point of this video is to let you know that your worth and value and your purity is not wrapped up in any of your past. It's wrapped up in who you decide to be right now. So if you're looking to make a change in your life, if you're looking to be someone and be the person that you are wanting to be, the person that you believe that God is calling you to be, then go and do it. Don't listen to church leaders and political leaders who tell you that your worth is bound in your body. It's not. Your worth and your value is wrapped up in who God is and who he says you are. How do we move forward? What does this look like? The number one way to beat purity culture is to create a community that reinforces the idea that you are valuable because of who you are, not what you've done. This doesn't mean that we create echo chambers that don't ever hold us accountable for the actions that we partake in. It doesn't mean that we get a free pass on every sin that we've ever committed. What it means is that we are engaged in a community that when we do mess up, when we do fall short, they're not going to cast us out and write us off as someone who will never be more than what they are or who they've been. Instead, we're a part of a community that will see that and that will, as Galatians 6 says, restore us up in a spirit of gentleness. I think it's about time that we stop letting purity culture determine our worth, and rather we start letting God determine our worth. So if you're part of a community that doesn't value you for who you are, I think it might be time to have a confrontation with those individuals and to hold them accountable. And I get it. Not a lot of us have the courage to do that, the motivation to do that. And purity culture tends to drive people into a cycle of shame that doesn't allow them the opportunity to speak out. And so I understand if you're in the position of, I just can't do it. I get that. So I'd call on you to find a community, find some people in your life, whether it's your closest friends or your family or another local church, whatever it looks like, whatever that is for you, and establish a community for yourself that where you can value others the way that God values them, and that they can value you the way that God values you. So let's move forward, knowing that our value comes from God, not our behaviors and not our past. Whether that past was given to us or we asked for it, it doesn't matter anymore. For more in-depth discussion on today's topic, check the description for links to full-length podcast episodes from Absurdity and A Beautiful Faith. And hey, at the end of my videos, I like to pay a little bit of a doggy tax for you, and so enjoy some awesome B-roll of sugar.